When most people think of ancient Rome, they imagine legions of soldiers running around in circles, chasing chariots or throwing javelins at each other while wearing helmets with bull horns on them. But the Romans had another talent that is perhaps even more important to their legacy. They were engineers. Ancient Roman engineering projects would put many modern construction companies to shame. We're talking about the straightest roads ever, bridges over terrifyingly deep gaps, aqueducts that could make any architect jealous, and structures made of concrete so advanced that scientists are still trying to copy it today. Here are 8 ancient Roman engineering facts that defy logic. Let's start with something simple: Roman roads. Most of us have taken the convenience of roads for granted. Just hop in your car and zoom wherever you need to go. But roads are actually an extremely advanced invention, and we don't even know who the first road builder was. However, we do know who built some of the best roads the world has ever seen. The Romans were masters of building roads, and the secret to their success was their incredible surveying techniques. Using long sighting rods and plumb bobs, Roman surveyors would set up their instruments and then measure distances as far as 4 miles away. They would take these measurements and use geometry to chart the most efficient path for their roads, making sure it was as straight as possible. To keep the road as straight as possible, the Romans invented a special tool called a groma. This device helped the surveyor see if his line was straight or if he needed to adjust. It consisted of 2 plumb bobs connected by a crossbar, and if the line was straight, the plumb bobs would hang exactly on top of one another. If not, then the surveyor would make adjustments until they were perfectly lined up. These techniques allowed the Romans to build some incredibly straight roads. In fact, the Appian Way, a road near Rome, is still considered the straightest road in the world. There isn't a single curve in it for 179 miles. The Romans used their road building skills to conquer 3 continents, and they also used them to deliver water to those same 3 continents. Not only were the Romans excellent road builders, they were also master surveyors. And they used these skills to create some of the most impressive aqueducts the world has ever seen. An aqueduct is an engineering marvel, whether it's in ancient Rome or modern-day New York City. They're just giant networks of pipes that bring water from one place to another. But there is a lot of work involved in making sure the water flows properly and doesn't leak. Not only did the Romans build aqueducts all over the empire, but they also made sure the water flowed through them constantly. One of the most famous aqueducts ever built is the Aqua Appia. It was built in 312 BC to supply water to the city of Rome, and it's still there today, supplying the city with water, although it's been renovated several times since ancient Roman days. The Aqua Appia was 6 miles long and carried water from the Appian Way, which is the same road we talked about earlier, to the Porta Matronia, where it entered the city. The aqueduct had a siphon near its end that allowed water to flow uphill. It was one of the first aqueducts to be built that didn't rely on gravity to move water. Instead, it used a watertight siphon to push water over the hills and into the city. The Aqua Appia was one of the largest aqueducts ever built during the Roman Empire, and it supplied the city with over 4 million gallons of water per day. Even though the Roman Empire spanned multiple continents, it never fell victim to boredom. They knew how to entertain themselves, and one of their favorite forms of entertainment was watching gladiators fight to the death. And where do you put a massive spectator sport like that? You put it in a stadium, of course. The Colosseum was one of the largest stadiums ever built during the Roman Empire, and it's still standing today, even though it was built over 2,000 years ago. The construction of the Colosseum began in 70 AD under the Emperor Vespasian, and it was completed in 80 AD under his son Titus. The Colosseum was built to replace the older wooden stadium that was used for athletic events. The Colosseum was much larger and could seat up to 50,000 spectators. It was also more versatile and could be used for a variety of events, including gladiatorial combat, animal hunts, executions, and reenactments of famous battles. The Colosseum was destroyed by earthquakes and neglect over the centuries, but it's still standing today, although it's in ruins. But let's move away from fighting to the death and talk about baths instead. Everybody likes to relax in the bathtub, but nobody can beat the Romans when it comes to bathing. The Romans loved baths, and they took them to a whole new level. In fact, they built some of the biggest and most luxurious bathhouses the world has ever seen. In ancient Rome, public baths were a big deal. They were a place to socialize, relax, and get clean. The baths were also used for exercise and as a place to get massages. The most famous Roman baths are the baths of Caracalla. They were built in 217 AD, the Emperor Caracalla, and were completed in 211 BC. The baths were named after the nearby Caracalla baths. The complex was huge and covered 11 acres. It had a library, a gym, a restaurant, and even a public school. But the main attraction was the baths themselves. They were filled with warm, soapy water and were surrounded by marble walls. The baths of Caracalla were free to the public and were open from early in the morning until late at night. Anyone could come to bathe, relax, and socialize. So if you're feeling stressed out, just remember, you can always head down to the local baths. Even though the Roman Empire is known for its military might, the vast majority of Romans were civilians. These people needed homes, farms, and businesses. And the Romans were also masters of constructing buildings that could house all of them. The Romans developed a type of concrete that was so strong that it's still used today. In fact, some of the Roman structures built with this concrete are still standing today, thousands of years later. Concrete is a building material that's made by mixing cement, sand, and water. The Romans developed a special recipe for concrete that made it stronger than any concrete that had ever been made before. They added lime and volcanic ash to the mix, and that made it much more durable. The Romans used this concrete to build roads, aqueducts, houses, and even the Pantheon. The Pantheon is a former Roman temple that's now a church. It was built in 126 A by the Emperor Hadrian, and it's still standing today. The Pantheon is famous for its concrete dome, which is the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. It's 142 feet wide and 78 feet thick. The dome is supported by 4 arches, and it's decorated with paintings of gods and goddesses. When the Pantheon was built, it was the largest building in Rome, and it was the first building to have a concrete dome. The dome was such an engineering marvel that it remained the largest concrete dome in the world for nearly 2,000 years. It was until the 18th century that a French architect designed a concrete dome that was larger than the Pantheon. Even though the Pantheon is no longer used as a temple, it's still an amazing example of Roman engineering. So far, everything we've discussed has been on dry land, but that doesn't mean the Romans were afraid of the water. They were masterful shipbuilders and engineers too. One of the greatest engineering achievements of the Roman Empire was the construction of their ships. The Romans built some of the largest and most powerful ships that the world had ever seen. They used these ships to transport goods and troops all over the empire, and they also used them to conquer new territories. One of the most famous Roman ships was the Libra. It was a warship that was used by the Roman Navy, and it was one of the largest warships of its time. The Libra was over 200 feet long and had 2 decks. It had rowers on the lower deck and soldiers with bows and arrows on the upper deck. The Libra was used in many famous battles, including the Battle of Actium in 32 BC. This battle was between Octavian, who would become the first emperor of Rome, and Mark Antony. The Libra was on Octavian's side, and it played a key role in his victory. The Libra was such an impressive ship that it became a symbol of Roman power. The Romans were able to build such large and powerful ships because of their advanced shipbuilding techniques. They used a new method of shipbuilding that allowed them to build ships faster and with better quality. They also developed new tools and equipment that made it easier to build ships. There's so much more to ancient Rome than meets the eye. They weren't just a bunch of guys in robes throwing gold coins around. They were brilliant engineers and scientists whose creations are still standing today. The Pantheon is just one example of their incredible engineering feats. It's hard to believe that the Romans built the Pantheon almost 2,000 years ago, because it looks like it could have been built yesterday. It really is a testament to their skill and ingenuity. Who knows what other secrets ancient Rome is hiding? Maybe one day we'll uncover another lost masterpiece that will blow our minds. Until then, we can marvel at the Pantheon and all the other incredible feats of Roman engineering.